All right, in this video, we're going to talk about formatting output in Python. Um, so, previously, in the examples that we've been doing before we talked about this, we were just using the concatenation operator, the plus, to kind of cram together um, strings, actual words, and then variable names to create output messages. So, um, that method, it works, but it's not great. So moving forward, what I want you to do is to use f strings to format output. And f strings are pretty convenient, and you have total control over what the output looks like. So as an example, um, we're going to take a look at this example, which I have here. So here I've got some variable names. Uh, One called name, another called adjective, and another called whole number. And then whatever those values are, I want to display a message that contains those variable names in the message. Some parts are static and don't change, and those parts I put in a string here. But then, if this variable changes to something else, it doesn't in this program, but just kind of pretend it did, then what I want is for whatever it changes to be up here. So it's updated dynamically. So for instance, if the user inputs something, which we haven't talked about yet, I want whatever they input to be reflected in this message. So that's why it's separated out like this. And so this is sort of the old method that we were using to do this. We just had the parts that weren't going to change of our output message, our own planet, which we call, and then here, the parts that were going to change that were stored in variables, we put those in variable names and use this concatenation operator to do that. And like I said, that's okay to do that. But moving forward, I want you to use f strings in order to do that. With the f strings, what you will do is to put an f right before the string where it starts, and that indicates to Python that it's going to be a formatted string, and then it will look for these format specifiers, which we'll talk about later. Inside the format specifier, what you can do is to put a variable name, like here it's name, and you can see that this is actually inside the string. So you need to put a curly brace, the name of the variable, and then a colon, and then followed by an optional formatting string in here. So we'll talk more about what this means later. And then over here, again, the string is getting long, so I go on the next line, and on the next line I have another format specifier for the adjective. So this is sort of the new way of doing it. And then you can see the results if we run this below. Here you can see this is the output of the original, and it had it looks fine. But here you'll notice that the Fred part, the name looks off, and that's because of this format specifier here. I was able to put some characters in there that altered the way it was displayed. Same thing over here for the adjective. And then you can see for the whole number, there had this format specifier. And so it also changed the way that was displayed. And you may say, hey, well, that doesn't look as nice as the previous way, but that's not really the point here. The point is that we can control this and alter that using the f string, which we cannot do it using the old method. So that's the reason why you want to use f strings. One thing here is, if I do this all the time, I forget to put the f there, and you can kind of see what happens. That format specifier gets printed literally there when you forget to put the f in front of the string. So I do that all the time, and then I'll notice, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. I forgot to put the f in front of the string. So that's the f string method, which is what I want you to use moving forward. All right, and we've already seen how to use it. To use the f string, all you do is put an f there at the beginning of the string, and then you put curly braces, you put stuff in the format specifiers, you embed that in the string. Format specifiers have the following syntax. So they start with a curly brace, Then they have the expression that you want to put in there, and that is usually going to be a variable name or involve some kind of variable name, because if you don't have a variable name in there, then you kind of there's no real points in doing that. And then followed by an optional colon, and that's if you have a format code following that. And we'll talk more about the format codes here in a second. The format code is optional. You only need it when you want to apply a format to the expression. So if you want to change the way it looks. So you don't always have to have that in there, but you can if you need it. If you only want to include the value of the variable in there, then you don't need the colon or the format code, just the expression part in there. And we'll see that in subsequent videos. So the format codes look like this, and you can see that's kind of a complicated looking thing in there. The things that are in brackets are optional. Okay, so all this fill, align, sign, all this hashtag, the 0 and the width, grouping option, precision type, they're all optional. You don't have to have that in there. You don't need to know every little part of this formatting language, but you can find the specifications in this thing here if you scroll down. So it's kind of complicated, but this will tell you every little minute detail that you would want to know about these format specifiers. We're only going to use certain parts of it, so don't feel like you have to memorize every single thing in there. So one important part is the width, and that width parameter states that it states the minimum number of characters to use for the output of a value, including any formatting characters in there. So looking at this example, I've got some examples of the width right here. So if I run this program, here I have the variable name, and right now it has Fred. So here's an example where I'm not using the width at all, and you can see that displays like so. So it just says there's no extra spaces are in there. In the next line, right, though, I have a width of 5, and Fred only has 4 characters in there, right? So it's going to require the minimum width of what's printed in there or what's inserted in there to be 5 characters long. So since Fred only has 4 characters, it will pad that with an extra space in there. So that's why we get an extra space. And so here, as I increase the space, the width parameter in there, you'll see, right, that it adds more and more spaces to pad that out. Where that's most useful is if you are trying to line up things in a table and do things like that. On line 10 of the example, you'll see that I have the greater than sign. And what the greater than sign, you can see if there's extra spaces that get padded onto the end, the default behavior is that the string gets left justified. So if you put a greater than in there, then you can write justify. Okay, so that's what that does. Here I have an underscore, and so that will in that example you'll see that the padding in there is not spaces but underscores. Okay, and then also here I left justify. That little less than sign means left justified. In the next example, I center the string that I want in there. So you can see it's got a width of 10 spaces. So it's going to use 10 characters total to print the value. And you can center it within that 10 spaces by using this circumflex here. When I use a decimal point here, then that's the precision. With strings, what that will do is it will take however many characters you are after that dot here. So this is a precision of 2. And so you can see what it does is it takes the first 2 characters. And in here, I've got kind of a mix here. I have a width of 20 characters. And then I pad it with asterisks instead of spaces, and I center the result. And then here I have a precision of 2. And so you can see that takes 2 characters, it centers it in this, and then it pads the blanks with asterisks there. So again, that's not something we'll do on a regular basis, but just to kind of show you how that works. So the fill character in those examples was the underscore, and I used the asterisk as the fill character. And then left justify, right justify, and center. And then the equal sign, that will place padding after the sign, if any, but before the digits in numeric types. So we'll take a look at that example here in a minute. The hashtag is not something we'll use a lot, but it displays an alternate form, and that's only valid for integer, float, and complex types. So those are numbers. And then the 0 character is used to pad numeric types with a leading 0. Again, that's not something that will commonly be used here. You can affect the sign. If you have a plus in for the numeric types, it outputs a plus or minus sign for a numerical value. Sometimes I think that's used in accounting things, applications. The minus sign outputs a minus sign for negative values, but nothing for positive, and that's the default. And then a space will output a minus sign for negative values and a space for positive values. And that's kind of helpful if you want to line up numbers in a table. And then for numeric types also, if you have a comma in your format specifier, that will use the comma as 1,000 separator. And then an underscore, that will use an underscore character as 1,000 separator. And there's also a value to use for n, a value that you can use there, n, for local aware separators. Other countries don't use the comma separator for the 1,000 separator like we do. They use the period is a common one. And so if you want your program to adjust to different locales, then you can use n there, and it will check the locale for wherever they're using the program and adjust accordingly to that. And then the precision, I showed you what the precision looks like for strings. For strings that extract substrings, it will pull out a part of it. For ints, whole numbers, right, you can't use precision. And then for floats, it rounds the number to a certain decimal place. And this is one that we will commonly use. So let's take a look at it in the examples. So here I have some padding and our width examples and number sign examples. These aren't very common at all, but the whole number value is 34,232. So when I print that out, you can see the effect of the padding there. The effect of the plus is just to put a plus in front of positive numbers. And then here you can see the effect of the X character that displays the decimal number in binary format. And then if I, for binary formats, you have the hashtag here. You can see that displays it in a alternate form. So that's what the hashtag does. And then for decimal numbers, here's the value of the decimal number. And here I'm mostly showing the precision. So you can see I use the precision values. All right, and so those are not ones that we'll commonly use, but this one right here, 0.3f, that displays this number rounded to 3 decimal places. So you can see the original number is 2719, so it rounds that number to 2 decimal places. And the F, right, is the format that we will consistently use for displaying these decimal numbers. So here you can see this one's rounded to 4 decimal places from that format string there. This one's rounded to 5 decimal places here. And then here I also use the width values. Here is a common thing that we'll do for strings, right? We won't use any format specifier at all. We'll just put the name of the variable inside the format specifier. And also here for the whole number, we will use that as well. And then for the decimal number, right, you can just kind of put it in there like so. And then if I ask you to round that decimal number to a certain number of places, let's say I ask you to round it to 2 decimal places and use commas as the decimal separators, so that would be common to do for money. The format specifier would be comma point to F, and that one is a super common one that we will use. Okay, so you can see that's how it rounded it there. The last part of the example here is that you shouldn't do this stuff, so you shouldn't really put literal values in there, although you can do that. That's kind of defeating the purpose. If you don't want this value to change, then just put it in the string. Okay. So most of the time we'll be using these F strings is when we want to put values of variables inside these so that they change when the value of that variable changes. Okay, so don't do this. All right, let's just see if there's anything else. I think I covered everything. S is used for strings, but that's the default, so you could omit it. And there's some other types, and it looks like we talked about this. For decimal numbers, right, you want to use F here, unless you want this notation that's similar to scientific notation for whatever reason. So F is way more common. We'll use that way more commonly than we will G in there. All right, and that's it on this video.